Carolyn Bourdeaux is the new Congresswoman representing Georgia's 7th Congressional District. That includes most of Gwinnett County and a portion of Forsyth County. She's been in office 100 days this week, and we're pleased she's joining us today to talk about what's happening in Washington. Congressman Bourdeaux, thank you and welcome.
Good to be here, Mitch.
We appreciate that. I want to start with some breaking news we all woke up to this morning, the mass shooting at the FedEx facility in Indianapolis. Just a week ago, the president signed that series of executive orders that he hopes is going to help curb some of this violence. Do you think what he has proposed is enough, or what else do you think needs to be done to fight this cycle of violence we seem to find ourselves in?
Right. It's very frustrating. And Congress, at least the House, has passed several pieces of legislation that will at least help a little bit. And this includes having universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and then closing the Charleston loophole, which was it extends the period of time that the FBI can investigate someone when there's a red flag on a background check.
Right.
So I think those are some important, they are modest, but some important steps in the right direction.
How do you balance that? Because you know the folks on the other side of the aisle are going to scream about the Second Amendment. How do you balance what you want to do in terms of solving this issue with concerns about the Second Amendment?
I understand that. I grew up with guns and, have a lot of conversations with people about this issue. But we really do have just shootings constantly. And we need to do something to get gun violence under control. And the bills out there right now are just some really straightforward solutions, such as, universal background checks that the vast majority of the American people support.
Right. Let's talk about the American Rescue Plan. I know that you support that plan, but even before it got passed, you had expressed some concerns along with some others, and you wrote a letter saying that money needed to be better targeted at people who needed assistance. What did you mean, and are you happy with what finally came out?
Well, this was a huge package, and so there's something in there, some things you like, some things you don't like.
Right.
They did end up targeting the money a bit more to people in need, both the unemployment insurance as well as the relief checks that went out. So I thought that was an important shift. But there's just so much in there that is so important to people in Georgia. It's everything from funding the vaccine to funding research to make sure we're tracing these new variants that are circulating in the community. And it's very important aid to families and small businesses to help them get on the other side of this crisis. Do
you think with the vaccine being distributed, I got my second shot today,
congratulations.
Maybe we're rounding the corner here. Is that going to be enough, or do you think Congress may have to come back again with some sort of package?
I don't think so. I think this package should get us to the other side of the crisis. I think the big problem we're facing with vaccines right now is that there are people who just don't think they need it and are reluctant to go get a shot. And we just need to really be clear about the message that everybody needs to get this vaccine. It's not just about protecting you. It's about protecting your family, your friends, your parents, your, extended community.
Right.
And so that will be the next challenge, is to really make sure we get enough people vaccinated. We need 70% of the population vaccinated to get to herd immunity and to really get this disease under control.
How badly do you think what's going on with the J&J vaccine is going to hurt that effort?
I think it's a problem, but everybody needs to know we do have enough Pfizer and Moderna to vaccinate the population. The real challenge with the J&J issue is that vaccine was particularly useful for really hard to reach populations. Right. So in Gwinnett, we have a lot of folks who don't speak English, who maybe are transient. And it's that population that is really better served by getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
And that's because it's hard to get them to come back for the second shot.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
The president is now proposing $2.3 trillion to improve and repair infrastructure around the country. Republicans say it's too expensive and pays for things that aren't truly infrastructure. What do you think of this plan, and will you support it?
Well, right now we're really going through it piece by piece, and I am pleased to report that I am a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, and this is a caucus that is half Democrat and half Republican. And right now we are working on a whole set of principles of, what we would like to see in the infrastructure package and also how to pay for it.
Right.
And so, I think it might not be in quite the form that the president has originally proposed, but I think there's a lot of interest in this country in making those kinds of investments. And I just actually pulled off from I-85 and the really rough traffic that we have there. And I think we need some improvement in this area to deal with congestion.
I'm going to stop just a minute and go back to something that you said, the Problem Solvers Caucus. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's this group. It's 28 Democrats and 28 Republicans, and
all House members.
All House members.
Okay.
Yep. Though we often work with the members on the other in the Senate. And there's a group there that kind of is our partner organization. And we're there to find areas of common interest and areas of overlap. And I will say there is a lot of common interest and a lot of overlap around infrastructure issues.
Well, I would think there would be a lot on a lot of issues, but I just don't think Congress has really been talking a lot lately. I'll add my editorial comment there for a minute. So I'm delighted to hear this. Is this a new group? I've never heard of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
It's been around for a while, but they have been, they faced some real challenges, of course, in bringing people together from both sides, but they had some huge success in getting the relief package that passed in December.
Right.
There was a COVID relief package, and that was really initiated and pushed forward by the Problem Solvers Caucus. And so it is very appealing to me. I have introduced several pieces of legislation which are bipartisan and bicameral, and actually, coming from that standpoint, I am one of the few legislators who's actually gotten legislation all the way through and signed by the president.
And that bill was what?
And that was the Paycheck Protection Program Extension Act.
Right.
And that provided, it extended the period where small businesses could apply for the Paycheck Protection Program and has been enormously helpful to small businesses around my district, around Georgia, and around the nation.
I want to talk about government spending for just a minute. We added $8 trillion to the national debt during the 4 years of the Trump administration. We're very early in the Biden administration, and we've spent $2 trillion on COVID relief. Now we've got $2.3 trillion. I was interested to hear you say you're looking at how we're going to pay for that $2.3 trillion package. But has Congress just completely let spending get out of control, and what do you think needs to be done?
So, when you're in a crisis, we've had, over 550,000 people die of COVID, right? That is the time when you want to boost the economy, you want to hold everything together. But now that we're coming out of the crisis, we need to think about paying for things. We need to think about fiscal responsibility. And I am currently working with a group. It's the Center for a Responsible Federal Budget. And we are looking at some process changes and ways to really try to bring both parties together around establishing some fiscal responsibility.
That sounds terrific. I want to touch on a couple of things. We're running out of time, but I did want to touch on a couple of things. You've been criticized by some political groups for not speaking up about Georgia's election laws and the changes that were made. And I'm curious what you think about what the General Assembly did, whether you think it was appropriate, what steps need to be taken, and just sort of what your general feelings are about the changes in the Georgia law.
Well, let me push back. I certainly have been outspoken about it, and I am very disappointed in that legislation. And what it's going to do is make voting harder for people in Georgia. We had an election on November 3rd. It was largely successful. We had huge turnout. There was no evidence, despite a lot of investigation, of any kind of serious voting irregularities. And then the state turned around and really clamped down on voting, and in particular clamped down on the no-excuse absentee ballot voting that many of us used, and it was fabulous. It worked very, very well. But now they've, added rules and regulations about sort of how you have to fill out the paperwork, and they've restricted access to the absentee ballot boxes. They've restricted the ability for nonprofit organizations to send out absentee ballot applications. So it's things like that that makes this very problematic. And because of that, I supported H.R. 1, the For the People Act, to establish some national standards around how we administer elections in this country.
Do you think that's something that is constitutional? Because the Constitution appears to give all election management to the states. Why would...
Yes,
Go ahead.
Yeah, within the Constitution, the federal elections, so the House and the Senate, do have the ability to oversee their elections and to establish how those work. And they are typically linked to the state elections because it is simpler to administer all of them together.
All right, one last question, and I'm going to let you go. It's been great that you've been here, and I'm very grateful. You've been in office for about 100 days now. What are your impressions of Congress? Did anything surprise you?
Well, the insurrection did on January 6th. That was a rough moment. But
where were you when that happened?
I was in the office buildings,
right.
And in a dark room behind multiple locked doors,
right.
And I was not in the line of attack. I was not in the House gallery where some of my colleagues were, and really were in a tough situation. But nonetheless, it was a very sobering moment, and one that I think has left a very bitter taste in people's mouths, and really, unfortunately, heightened how divided we are.
Right.
But I will say, as we take up infrastructure and as we start to look to the future, I am feeling very hopeful as I do these meetings with the Problem Solvers Caucus, as I work in a bipartisan fashion to really try to tackle the problems that we have as a country. And so while we've been through a really rough patch, I am enormously hopeful about what comes next.
Congressman Bourdeaux, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll come back again when news warrants.
All right. Thanks so much.